Pachinko, episode 3. What is wrong with this dude? We start with the contrasting view of young Sunja and old Sunja, and they're both making dinner. Younger Sunja, she's working on a fire stove and she's working outside. She's literally cutting her food on a dirty table just outside, because at that point, that's just how things were done. Flash to 1989, she's using a rice cooker to make her white rice. You see them both expertly feeding their families, but in very different ways. Then whenever you flash forward, you see that these traditions and these things that make their culture what it is have slowly gone away with the invention of technology. And it's not the culture, it's not the world that they came from. After Sunja feeds her son and he leaves for work, to only find out that her sister-in-law has passed away. It's very sad, and older Sunja breaks down and she just immediately drops down into kind of a squat position and grabs the bed, because really she was the last connection to Korea, which we'll get into in a little bit. Just stay tuned, we'll get more into that. But flashing back to young Sunja, she's starting to have the beginnings of pregnancy. She's feeling fatigued, she's feeling nauseous, she's not able to eat the same way, and she doesn't know what she's gonna do, but she knows that Hansu is the father. But Hansu has gone back to Japan for several months. A lot of the people that are selling her wares tell her that maybe Hansu won't come back. A man like that, that's that attractive, that has that much money, and that is that powerful, has a lot of options, and maybe he won't come back. Young Sunja is fatigued, and that's very worrisome for young Sunja. I haven't said this before, but how awesome is the intro? After the intro, we go straight into the funeral for Sunja's sister-in-law, Solomon's great aunt, and she's being cremated. And you see that Sunja, when she gets home, just can't figure out where to leave the ashes, even though there will be a burial place that will be set up in the next few days where the ashes will be left. Solomon suggests, why don't we put her on the piano where she can be around the memories of her family? But older Sunja, being the outgoing person that she's always been, says, isn't that a little obvious, Solomon? As that's happening, the father is letting in older Sunja's preacher. He says, hey, maybe she would enjoy being here, or surrounded by memories, surrounded by her family. But suddenly, older Sunja thinks that is a fantastic idea, which Solomon takes very personally. Jin-ha, being the amazing actor that he is, if he doesn't win an Emmy this year, I swear to God. Flashing back in time to younger Sunja, Hansu is back. Whenever Hansu sees Sunja, the next thing you know, they're bumping uglies in a storm by a cove, all of this jazz. She eventually works up the courage, because she feels that they are in love, to say, I'm pregnant. And he says all of the right things at first. He's completely into them having a baby. However, he does also now admit right then that this is an arrangement. Just like any marriage, this is an arrangement. And he has a family back in Osaka, Japan, and that they have an arrangement that as long as there is no love, he can have sexual relationships with other women while he's away on business for months and months and years or whatever. But Sunja didn't know any of this. He didn't tell her, but he's pretending like she should have just known. And he says, I'll buy you the best house, I'll buy our kids the best stuff, your mother will never have to work again. But that's not enough for Sunja. Sunja feels hurt by this. She's too proud, she's too big of a person, she's too much of a person to accept this from someone like Hansu. She leaves. At the same time this is all happening, there's a man on the boat. He's not doing too well. He seems, at this point, we kind of think it's seasickness. He's just not feeling well. And he gets off the boat and he says, where is this boarding house? This is where I'm staying. And they say it's a bit of a trek. It's about, an hour or 40 minutes this direction. If you go, you'll find it. And he says, look, I can make it, it's raining and all of that stuff. And he bumps Hansu, and he doesn't really seem to care about Hansu too much. He's in his own suit, so he's not really that worried about it. But in his sickness, he bumps Hansu, and you could see Hansu turn around and be like, I will handle you up. I'll beat you up for bumping me. But the other guy doesn't care. He gets to the boarding house right after Sunja. Sunja is trying to tell her mother about all of the horrible things that just happened to her, about how she feels about it. But right then, then he stumbles in and collapses right in front of the house in the rain, just falls into the mud. It turns out he has tuberculosis and that he's on his way to Osaka to be a preacher, and he's going to work at churches. This time getting tuberculosis in Korea is not good, and his chances are very limited, and the pharmacist, which is like the doctor at the time, says there's really nothing that we can do. We need to report the tuberculosis so that the government can come and take him, but I think that means that they are just going to kill him and quarantine him. The mother decides that if he makes it to the morning, I'll take care of him. He seems like a pretty well-to-do guy, and she is a very caring person, so she's not just going to let him die. Flashing forward to 1989, older Sunja is not really into leaving the sheets and all of the belongings of her sister-in-law there. She says, I won't let anything like this break me. I'm gonna be better than this. I'm gonna just take care of it or whatever. But you can tell that this is something that's really, really hurting her, regardless of how much she's willing to share with Solomon. Solomon has the idea to take older Sunja to meet the woman that he's been trying to buy the hotel from, who is also an older Korean lady that went through a lot of the same struggles that Sunja did. They are graciously asked in, and the woman reluctantly actually serves them dinner knowing that he has brought his grandmother, and they start to talk about Korea, and they start to talk about the difference in the taste of the rice, and you can literally taste the way that Korean rice is different, that it has more of a nuttier taste. And you learn that this woman, though probably in her late 60s or 70s, is going to school because she was never able to get an education in Korea. So now she just finished her 6th grade education. She was number 3 in her class with children, and she's incredibly proud of that. And not just her, Sunja is incredibly proud of that. That's something that Sunja always wanted. Sunja might have learned to read, or she might have learned to tell time like Hansu promised, but we don't know that for sure. She definitely never had a formal education like a normal Japanese person at that time, or like a Solomon. They miss their homeland. That they might have come here willingly, but they didn't come here knowing the stakes, and that everything has just been rough for them for that entire time. That they both have had to work their entire lives just to get almost to the middle, and that's a very tough thing to think about, especially for two people that can't read and write. And to think about that Sunja now has a grandson just 2 generations later that is now a businessman working on $1 million deals, it just shows you the hard work and dedication that Sunja and Sunja's son put in to make sure that their family slowly moved up to what they consider where they deserve to be. And that the thing is that at this point, Japanese people are keeping them down, and it's tough. Older Sunja and this woman talk about going back to Korea. Older Sunja has never been back. She didn't have the money, and then she didn't have the time, and then it just seemed like, what's the point? There's no one there anymore. The cities won't look the same and everything like that after all of these years. The woman says to walk down a street and to hear your language, to smell your foods, to know that your home means more than anything. And this really starts to affect older Sunja, and she starts to cry, saying that her sister-in-law definitely always wanted to go back, but they never went. It just didn't, and now she'll never get the chance. That really hurts older Sunja, and that's when the woman says, so you brought your grandmother to try to get me to sell my hotel. She says, that's pitiful, and you're kind of a piece of shit for it. But that's whenever Solomon kind of lashes out, and you start to see the difference in the mindset of Korean people that live in Japan in generations, right? Like, the older people are worried about their heritage, about the fact that they were taken from this place. Solomon doesn't know Korea. He knows Japan, and Solomon is hell-bent on making himself a major player in Japan without having to do it in an unethical way. He says that it's their time now, and if you don't get that, that's your fault. Sunja finally works up the courage to tell her mother that she's pregnant. It's only a day later or so, but when she does it, you can tell that her mother realizes what's going to happen, that that Sunja is going to become a social pariah and an outcast, and that in order to keep them, the whole family will become an outcast, which her mother doesn't seem willing to do. There also was definitely a plan to marry off her daughter to a man of a certain wealth that would hopefully end their struggles, in the fact that they have to work all day, every day to run this boarding house and make everyone happy. She starts to talk about all the things that will be impossible for Sunja. Sunja just says, "I'm sorry," and there's really nothing left to say. But not knowing that the man with tuberculosis has woken up and can hear through the thin walls this whole conversation. Solomon gets back to his office, and as he's walking in, he looks really dejected. He looks like he failed, and he knows that he's gonna have to give bad news. But that's whenever Tom comes out and says, "Solomon, you did it. She sold the hotel for 1 billion yen. It was a brilliant move bringing your grandmother. You're the best businessman in here." And suddenly there's a celebration for him. He comes from 0 to 100. He walked into his office and he gets a phone call again. It's his sister, who said that she could see him last time. So as soon as he walks in, he gets a phone call. I don't think that's a coincidence. She starts playing these games. He explains that he did close the deal and all of that stuff, but she keeps on playing all of these games and won't give a real answer about when he's gonna get to see her. That's when Tom bursts in like a frat boy on pledge week and just says, "I'm your fucking boss, hang the phone up." He says in Japanese, "He's gotta go," and then puts the phone down, and Solomon yelling, don't hang up, don't hang up, don't hang up," but it's too late, so they go and they celebrate. Man with tuberculosis, who is a preacher that is going to be headed to Osaka soon, has woken up. He says, "I need to go to the market and I need to get my legs under me. I need to get stronger, so I need to go." But the mother says, "You're still too weak. Take my daughter Sunja just to make sure you're okay." On the way there, they see Hansu, and Hansu's like, "I can't believe you're with another dude. This is another man in a suit," which people don't wear suits in Korea, so this is another wealthy person. But this is a wealthy Korean that has a heart of gold. He's a preacher. He's going to spread the word of God, which is a noble pursuit for anyone, regardless of what you believe. The preacher decides that, "We're gonna go and do my errands after lunch. I'll take you to this noodle shop." It's a Japanese noodle shop, which Sunja has never been to. She's never been to an actual restaurant before. That's how poor she is. So they sit down and they eat, and everything seems new. You can just see that innocence. It's the same innocence like before Hansu laid out that blanket. It's just experiencing something new. It's the childlike wonder of getting to do something for the first time, and it's a very beautiful thing. The preacher eventually comes clean and says, "I heard through the wall that you're with child," and he's not being rude. He says, "I want to be a friend. I want to help you through this really tough situation, and I know a way that we could maybe let you have this child and give it away and then come back and people won't treat you like an outcast." But Sunja stands firm, so firm, and she says, "I was raised by an outcast. My father was a cripple and they treated him like an outcast, and I will never, ever, for any reason, let this child go. This child will be the reason for her existence. She will work until her fingernails fall out," her words, "until this child has everything that this child could ever want. That is what her father promised her, and that is what she will give this child." It's incredibly inspiring. I think that all parents, no matter what culture or class system you come from, can agree that you only want the best for your children. The preacher says, "Could you ever forget the man that impregnated you?" And she says, "I'm trying to." And he says, "Well, that's not my question." He says, "If someone were to ask you to go to a faraway land and wants to be the father of your child, even though he doesn't know her, would you do it?" And she has an emotional moment because it also means leaving her family, which would be a good thing for her family now because of Korean culture, and they won't be outcasts or pariahs. She says yes, and that's where our episode ends. It's a beautiful episode. If you didn't cry during this episode, I don't know who you are as a human being. And again, just awesome. Just awesome. Well, you see Solomon, and Solomon's trying to navigate this world where he's trying to become a captain of industry. He's trying to take over the business world, but he's fighting from a man down where he's a Korean in Japan. And then when he goes to America, he's an Asian in America, and he's just wherever he goes, there's prejudice. And you just see him trying to navigate this the best he can. Sunja, you're starting to see the connections between young Sunja and older Sunja, how she got to where she is. You haven't gotten the full story. I can't wait to fill you all in on that in the next couple of episodes. You're starting to see that as a wide-eyed, innocent person, she was a bit taken advantage of by people that were more worldly. Her beauty and her kindness and everything seemed to be taking her to the right place, but we know that she had to work hard for her entire life, so she never has an easy go at it. And I'm just very eager to see the connection. Hansu, you're really starting to see his true colors. You find out that he has a wife in Osaka and a family. He's just too horny on a business trip. All right, guys, so Pachinko is obviously an amazing show. We're through the 3rd episode. I'll have the next episode for y'all next week. Make sure you tune in for that. Bringing you content like this that you like, that you love. I see the stats. I see that y'all are watching. Y'all are watching a lot of it. So make sure you're liking and subscribing so that we know that these are the videos you like and we keep on making more like that. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.